How come my company never asked me?
My idea of financial security.
Country Financial does. Your country representative can help protect what you have now and prepare for the future.
Yeah.
What's your idea of financial security?
Democratic leaders here in the Illinois General Assembly have cobbled together a new state budget for fiscal year 2015 without extending the state's income tax on a permanent basis. But the tax will certainly be another question that lawmakers revisit later this year. Here for the discussion to launch things with this edition of Illinois Lawmakers, Rich Miller of CapitalFacts.com. Rich, this is not the budget Governor Quinn wanted to have based on extending that income tax rate increase permanently.
Yeah, very far from it. This budget is a disaster for him, politically and governmentally. I don't think it can be overstated.
It's basically a maintenance budget, if you will, a temporary way of getting through the current fiscal year or the upcoming fiscal year with using existing revenues and a lot of one-time budget fixes.
Yeah, I guess you could call it a maintenance budget. It's more of a kick-the-can budget. You know, there'll be some layoffs, there's going to be some cuts. The problem is if they don't get some new revenue in January or make extreme cuts, next fiscal year they're going to be facing maybe a $6 billion hole. Now, on the federal level, $6 billion is no big deal. They just go out and borrow it, right? You can't do that here.
Speaker Madigan is known for being very persuasive when he wants to be, but he was starting off with a deficit because he had something like a dozen House members that already said in a resolution that they weren't going to vote for extending this thing.
Right. I mean, there's a case to be made that he killed this thing way back in January of 2013 when he allowed most of his politically targeted members to sponsor or co-sponsor a bill that demanded the immediate rollback of the income tax hike. 71 members is what he has, minus 12 is 59. He needs 60 to pass a bill.
So at the end of the day, after November, there's still going to be a lot of pain in this budget. There are going to be agencies that have shortfalls. There are going to be potential of layoffs, facilities closing.
Right, there's a potential for all of that. I think what most people expect a governor to do is to try to avoid making deep cuts in the first half of the fiscal year. But if he doesn't get his tax increase in January, that makes the problem even worse in the second half of the fiscal year.
And we're focusing on January for a couple of reasons. That's when, by then, the budget making process is underway as the new governor takes office, or the current governor, whoever it is. But you're also looking at a small window of time in there where you can pass a budget without a supermajority.
Correct. You can do one of two things. You can do a lame duck session, so people that lose their election, even if they campaigned against a tax increase, could vote yes. Perhaps some Republicans, if Quinn gets reelected, might vote yes in order to get a job. Or let's say Rauner gets elected, Bruce Rauner, then they just let him deal with it. So whenever he wants to deal with it, and
So is this, as the speaker suggested, a referendum on the tax increase? The governor's race itself?
I mean, if you vote for Pat Quinn, you're voting for a tax increase. If you're voting for Bruce Rauner, you're voting for his promise that he won't raise taxes. The problem is the hole is so big, he's got to.
Rich Miller, thanks very much. Always appreciate your insights on Illinois lawmakers. Next, the first of our newsmaker interviews with the Democratic leaders of the Illinois General Assembly. Democratic House Speaker Michael Madigan of Chicago is our guest on this week's Illinois Lawmakers. Mr. Speaker, good to have you back on the program.
Nice to see you again.
Last time we met, that was the afternoon of the governor's budget speech on March 26th. At the time, you seemed rather confident that you would find the 60 votes in the Democratic caucus to pass the temporary income tax extension. What happened?
Well, when we started to talk with the members of the House caucus, we realized that there weren't going to be 60 Democratic votes for the extension of the income tax increase. And we actually went to caucus and took a vote. And the result of the vote of the caucus was 34 yes, 30 no. Others present or not voting. So 34 is a long way from 60, which led us to the judgment that we were not going to be able to extend the income tax increase, and that we would have to get busy crafting a budget different than the one that we were contemplating.
Well, you also had at least, I believe it was about a dozen House members, House Democrats, who said earlier they signed on to a resolution that they would not go for extending the temporary income tax. You were starting with a deficit to begin with.
It was going to be a difficult roll call. We knew that from the very beginning. We just picked up additional information as we went along. And on that day when we took the caucus vote, it was pretty clear that we were not going to be able to extend the income tax increase.
So at that point, you tried a couple of different things. You passed a budget, the House passed a budget, House Democrats passed a budget at the level of spending that the tax increase would have funded, about $38 billion. That passed narrowly. But at the same time, no one wanted to vote for the income tax, so you had to go back. And you gave them a budget proposal that showed what it would look like without the revenues.
Sure. The House considered 3 budgets, and we adopted a budget that would have been consistent with an extension of the income tax increase. We rejected what I would characterize as a doomsday budget, and then finally we passed a budget that I would describe as a middle-of-the-road budget. Not an ideal budget, but we're able to maintain basic services that most Illinoisans have come to want, and that's about where we are right now.
How does that budget, maintenance budget, if you want to put it that way, reflect the Democratic priorities here in the House?
Well, I think it reflects the Democratic priorities because it was passed with only Democratic votes. There was no Republican support for the budget. We provided that education, elementary and secondary education, would be appropriated at a flat level, which required a slight increase in the appropriation. Thereafter, we're able to maintain the level of services and human services that we have been providing. It's not a perfect budget. It's not an ideal budget. You characterize it as a maintenance budget. I think that's a good choice of words.
It's a budget that has a lot of one-time budget fixes or approaches.
As I said, it's not ideal. We acknowledge that.
There's some borrowing, a lot of interfund borrowing. There's a lot of pushing back, paying off current bills and the like. And it's possible that after November, you're going to be back at the same situation where you were. This is based on one-time fixes.
For 4 to 5 to 6 years, the state of Illinois has been faced with the question, do you wish to raise additional revenue to pay for the current level of services or for an increased level of services? Now, in January of 2011, we raised the income tax on a temporary basis. We failed to extend that tax this month. I'm sure there will be members of the legislature that will say that after the election we should come back and try and raise more revenue because either they want to maintain the current level of service or they want to increase the level of service. But that's the nature of the legislature. Whether those people constitute a majority is to be decided sometime in the future.
Some of your own Appropriations Committee chairs were saying that they were worried that even with all of the work that had gone into this, we still may be seeing employee layoffs. We may see facilities closings.
The agencies under the governor's control will be called upon to manage the level of appropriation and the budget that they've been given. So as I said, it's not an ideal budget, but there is spending authority similar to last year. And the challenge for the heads of the agencies is to manage those budgets.
And you and your Senate counterpart, John Cullerton, were able to come to an agreement here at the end of the session to craft this. Were there any significant differences between the two of you?
I wouldn't say significant differences. There were differences. There will always be differences among Democrats. I think that they've been pretty well resolved.
As we move through this, of course, the budget holds K through 12 schools and higher education relatively flat. A small increase for K through 12 schools at this point. I also see another $50 million for back wage increases that were owed to state employees, and another $50 million for the Chicago Teachers Pension Fund.
Sure, yeah. Those are all good things. They could have been more, but they are what they are, considering the fact that we did not extend the income tax increase.
Did the governor do as much as he could have to sell the income tax increase?
I've spoken to the governor's performance in caucus, which preceded the caucus where we took our vote. And I thought that he did a very good job. He was very eloquent, he was very passionate, he argued very strongly on behalf of providing a level of service that people want in this state and extending the income tax increase.
Another question that's come up in recent days, you've kind of stepped into the relationship between the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency that manages the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. You have put legislation forth that would create an independent body to govern that organization. What's your thinking on that?
My thinking is that the Abraham Lincoln Library and Museum is a treasure of the state of Illinois. It's one of the assets that the state has, that the people of the state have. It ought to be improved. We ought to work toward federal accreditation and enrollment in the federal system of libraries and museums. And today, that institution is required to check in with a routine state agency. I'm not being negative when I use the word routine, but the Historic Preservation Agency is not one of the premier agencies of state government. It's a routine state agency, and a treasure like the Lincoln Library and Museum is being required to check in with this other agency. They ought to be separated, and the library and the museum ought to be able to chart its own destiny, work to even improve the quality and the beauty of the library and the museum. That's my thinking. There's similar situations. The universities in the state are set up where there's a governing board that selects a president. In the State Board of Education for the state, the governor appoints people. They select the chief executive officer. It's simple. Some people don't want to make it simple. Some people want to engage in a lot of political speculation. So be it. I think history will prove that I know what I'm talking about. This is an asset of the state that ought to be improved. And the route to improvement is to separate them from the jurisdiction of this other agency.
Some of that speculation centers on the fact that a couple of your friends are involved with the, are part of this. The executive director of the Lincoln Museum, and is friends with the landlord of your office in Chicago.
You know, in America, people have friends. This is not a communist country. People have friends. I have friends. You have friends. And this is my reference where I say some people want to be negative, they want to be critics, they want to engage in a lot of simple political gossip. So be it. That agency should be left to chart its own course.
Is this in any way connected to your hopes for landing the Obama Presidential Library?
No,
as well?
it's not. It's not. I think that we ought to do whatever we can as a state to convince President Obama to locate his library and museum in Illinois. That's why I've announced my support for an appropriation of $100 million. Some people have been very critical of that. They've said that the other presidential libraries and museums are done with private funding. So be it. This, again, would be another asset for the state of Illinois. There would be unbelievable international tourism coming to the Obama Library and Museum, and if it were located in the state of Illinois, it would be to the benefit of the state.
Mr. Speaker, thanks very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you here on the program. Up next on Illinois Lawmakers, we'll have a conversation with Senate President John Cullerton. Democratic Senate President John Cullerton of Chicago is our guest on this week's Illinois Lawmakers. Good to have you back, Mr. President.
Thank you for having me on.
Early on, your House counterpart, Mike Madigan, seemed rather confident that he could muster 60 votes to keep the personal income tax rate at 5% instead of letting it sunset back to 3.75% next January. But at the end of the day, the House Democrats couldn't come up with the votes. So where do we go from there?
Well, the governor started us off with a request that we extend the income tax. We have the 5% flat income tax is one of the lowest income taxes in the Midwest. It's lower than all the states that surround us. It's scheduled to go down to 3.75. As a result, there's a big drop in revenue. So the governor said, please extend it. I went over to our caucus and we got the sufficient number of votes to pass that, but obviously we had to wait a little tougher in the House. They have fewer supporters for it. And so as a result, they did not do it. And that caused us then to have to try to pass a budget, even though we wouldn't have that extra money.
You kind of steered at the end of the day kind of a middle course on this and came up with what some would call a maintenance budget. It's about $35.7 billion, if I recall, slightly over the current year's budget. How did you craft this thing? It's got a lot of borrowing in it.
What we tried to do was to maintain basically the same appropriation level as we did the previous year. But when you do that, it doesn't account for increase in costs. So there's certain contracts that we have to honor. There's certain liabilities that come from healthcare costs, which go up. And so, the inflation rate goes up a little bit as well. So as a result, with this budget, it's going to be able to maintain the levels of spending for education and state operations. But there is more borrowing. There's more deferring old bills and increasing old bills. And as a result, about halfway through this year, we're going to see that we're going to have to address this shortfall.
So basically, coming up after the November elections is probably about the time when the wheels would start to come off this budget.
And it wasn't the way we wanted to do it. We were willing to do it up front, give the governor credit for asking for it, but there wasn't sufficient support for that.
Did the governor's call for the $500 property tax rebate cause any problems? Because that was some new spending added to the bill.
What people don't realize is that we have a program now where people get a 5% credit on their property taxes. We're putting $570 million back into people's pockets. The governor wanted to increase that to about $1.2 billion. But again, without the tax revenues, we were unable to do that. But we still keep in place the fact that people get a 5% tax credit on their property tax, on their income taxes for the property taxes that they pay.
Let's go into a little bit more of the mechanics of this thing. There's $650 million in what's called interfund borrowing. That's where some of the dozens of state funds have some excess that you can go in and get on a one-time basis.
The people don't know this because it's complicated. We have what's called a general revenue fund, but then we also have something almost the same size, or actually a little bit bigger, of a whole bunch of different checking accounts. So we call these individual funds. Things like the road fund, which are funded through gas taxes, or other funds funded through fees. That's state money, and in some cases there's surpluses. So what we're doing is borrowing $650 million of that. We're paying it back with interest. But again, that's something that if we had the revenues at a flat tax rate, we wouldn't have to do that.
And vendors who are owed the state money, they're going to have to wait longer to get what they're owed.
I'm sorry, which?
Vendors who are owed money by the state of Illinois?
Well, the big problem is in group health insurance. So we provide health insurance for state employees, university employees. That's the one area where we've been behind in paying our bills. And that's unfortunately not going to improve as a result of the failure to extend this tax.
There are some Appropriations Committee chairs over here in the House that are quite concerned that despite all the work that's gone into this, as you indicated a little later in the year, you're going to run into some really tough problems in paying the bills and keeping people on. They're worried about layoffs. They're worried about facilities closings. Are these things waiting in the wings?
I think for the first half of the year, we can probably get by. And the governor has the ability to manage the budget. But these pressures will build up. And believe me, there's a governor's election this year, whether Mr. Rauner wins or Mr. Quinn wins. The next year, which starts July 1st of 2016, will be even worse, because that'll be a full year of not having this tax rate at the level it is now. Well, and so that's where you're going to find the need in January of next year for us to deal with this year's budget as well as the following year's budget.
So what you're looking at right now is somewhere between $1.6 to $1.8 billion hole in the current or the upcoming fiscal year's budget. But when you go into FY 2016, right, as you're indicating, that's where I'm hearing figures of $4 to $6 billion.
Absolutely. And so everything would be on the table. It doesn't necessarily have to be an extension of the tax at 5%. It could be lower. There could be other loopholes that we could close. But these are the things we're going to have to deal with. Unfortunately, it's going to be done after the election. We wanted to do it before the election, to be honest with people. So I'm honestly telling people right now, we're going to have a problem halfway through this fiscal year.
So there could be, if you will, a January surprise.
Won't be a surprise. I'm telling you right now.
Okay.
We are going to have to, whether it's Governor Quinn or whether it's Bruce Rauner, next January we're going to have an opportunity to deal with a huge deficit. And in a month after that, in February, the governor will have to give his budget for the next year. And that's where you have these huge deficits. I mean, that's why we said we need to do this extension, but obviously the House didn't have enough votes, and so we didn't do it.
And it would make the doomsday budget scenario that you talked about a few days ago around here, pale by comparison.
Exactly.
Cuts would fall heavily on public education, K through 12, higher education.
We're trying to
public
defer
safety.
those cuts now in the hopes that halfway through the year we'll have an opportunity to rectify the problem.
Were there any significant differences in arriving at this budget framework between you and the Speaker?
Oh, no, we had a total agreement. We worked together, and the budget that is passed is a budget that's an agreed upon budget between the House and the Senate. Democrats. The Republicans haven't voted for a budget in 6 years I've been the President of the Senate. And it's unfortunate because if they were at the table, they'd have input. And they would have part of their philosophy reflected, but when they don't vote, I have to rely upon just Democrats.
Some of the noise we're hearing right now in the Illinois House chambers is coming from the Republican side of the aisle, where they're saying, if nothing else, Democrats, thank you for realizing you don't need to raise the income tax or keep the income tax at that level to pass this year's budget.
Yes, but of course, they're not recognizing all these big pressures. And I would suggest to you that it'll be, if their candidate for governor wins, he'll be asking them to relieve the pressures as well.
Does this really become, in November, a referendum on the tax increase in the governor's race when you get down to it, between Pat Quinn, who wanted to go for that, and Bruce Rauner, who's, well, we don't really know where he's at the moment?
Well, the problem has been that he is not, that is, Mr. Rauner has never told us what his plans are for the budget, even though he expects to be the governor for the fiscal year that we're voting on. So he's been given a pass because the numbers don't add up if you don't have some type of revenue. And he should know that, and hopefully the voters will continue, and the media will continue to press him on what his plans are. This reminds me of, I'm so old, I remember Richard Nixon had a secret plan to get out of Vietnam. This is what he's saying. Just elect me and we'll tell you how we're going to do it later. He should be forced before the election to tell the people what his plans are.
There are some other issues, though, of course, that have been at the top of your agenda over in the Senate. Senator Andy Manar from Bunker Hill, downstate Illinois, has been doing a lot of work on changing the way that the state funds education to help poorer districts. That has moved through the Illinois Senate. It's over here in the House now.
Yes, it's Senate Bill 16. He did a tremendous job. He's a freshman senator, but he was the chief of staff for me, and he's been on the staff before. He's very knowledgeable. The state school aid formula is incredibly complex, but it needs to be fixed. That bill does it. He's open to other suggestions as well, and we hope the House will take it up.
Senator Cullerton, thanks very much. Always appreciate your time on Illinois Lawmakers. Up next on the program, what do Illinois Republicans think about the Democrats' new budget? That's next on Illinois Lawmakers. Deputy Republican leader Patti Bellock of Hinsdale joins us now on the program. This budget that the Democrats are moving through on party line votes isn't nearly what you were originally expecting at this point in the year.
No, it wasn't, and we're happy that it's no tax increase, but a lot of the spending and the revenues we're not quite sure because it's changed 3 times in the last couple of weeks so fast. But our main message is that we did not want to extend the temporary tax increase, and we feel that we have accomplished that. And I think the rest of Illinois, the taxpayers of Illinois, appreciate that, and we have all been hearing from them, and I think both sides of the aisle have.
From the Republican perspective, though, it may be a short-lived victory because the Democrats are already saying this is going to come back up again after the November elections.
Absolutely, and I don't think that we have really solved the problem, especially with the borrowing and sweeping of funds, because you are going to have to replace those. So if you're taking $600 million out of those now into the next budget, you're going to have to face that issue front on.
And this budget may be, if you go into fiscal year 2016 without any sort of extension of that income tax rate increase or any other sort of new form of revenue, you may be looking at anything from a $4 to $6 billion hole in what comes up before the next governor, whoever that may be.
Right, and I think that that's going to be a huge challenge, but I think that if we do it properly and start facing that now, which is what we tried to do before last year, you need to go look line by line through all the agencies and find out where we can do some revenue, enhancement, from different ways, and then also how you can look at cutting some of the programs that maybe don't have the outcomes. That's what I'm always trying to stress, is to take a look at the transparency, but also the outcomes of several of the programs that we have.
Will this budget even last throughout the fiscal 2015 year?
I doubt it. I really think that there are so many problems within this budget because it's just become a piece of a patchwork quilt almost in the last 2 or 3 days.
Representative Bellock, thanks very much. Always good to have your insights on the program. That concludes this edition of Illinois Lawmakers and our weekly coverage for the month of May. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with the final update on our website. That's illinoislawmakers.org. From all of us at Illinois Lawmakers, thanks so much for watching.